The outcome of the rerun and by-elections conducted by the Independent National Electoral Commission on Saturday revealed that a lot still needs to be done to achieve credible polls in Nigeria, as violence, ballot snatching, and compromise by electoral officers marred some of the areas where the exercise held. Now, the rerun by-elections conducted by INEC, as ordered by the courts in 80 local government councils across 26 states of the Federation, raises questions over the time it will take for Nigeria to put together a credible process that the electorate will fully agree with and be satisfied with. Now, the elections were held to replace members who died or resigned their memberships of the national and state assemblies, and as well as rerun elections at designated constituencies or polling units ordered by the election appeal courts. Well, let's get a review of INEC's performance at the rerun and by-elections that just concluded over the weekend from the perspective of the civil society organizations. I'm now being joined in the studio by Emmanuel Njoku, who's the Director of Elections at the CSO Connected Development. Thank you so much for joining us. Talk to us about your view from the perspective of not just INEC alone, but also the conduct of Nigerians. What exactly have you been able to aggregate from Saturday's exercise?
So, I like the way you put it there, that how long will it take for Nigeria to be able to have a credible election? So by saying that, you're also looking beyond INEC. And I'm not surprised the performance of INEC. You remember in the last time I was here, I told you that, well, it's just 5% of the polling units across Nigeria. So I was expecting that INEC would do well. And so if you've noticed, the complaints is not about opening of polls, it's not about beavers functioning or not functioning, it's not about inclusion, it's not about polling units. So the complaints are mostly around, the individual behavior of some INEC staff. Like you mentioned, what happened in Just North, and what happened in Enugu South, where the ballot from EC80 as a result were unavailable at the opening of polls in most of the local government areas. And then the second challenge we noticed was security. So this goes to say that for us to have an election that will work, that will be credible, that will be free and fair, every stakeholder needs to, all hands needs to be on deck. And one thing I've always said, for our elections to be credible, one major factor is the role of security agencies. Why we acknowledge this, that they are doing well, you will agree with me that there is room for them to do more, because their failure to do the needful messes up the whole process. And my concern in regard to this speaks to the election in Ikono in the federal constituency in Akwa Ibom State. You recall that in the 2023 general election, that very election was inconclusive because on the day of the election, because election couldn't hold in 33 polling units because of insecurity. INEC now fixed a date for a supplementary election to conclude the election in those 33 polling units. It still couldn't hold because of insecurity. Somehow they went around to make a declaration. The returning officer went around to make a declaration, even when it was against the margin of lead rule. But the court upturned it, and now INEC went back to this same place to carry out an election, and yet the election still couldn't happen because of insecurity. So if you look at it that way, and to speak sincerely, it is not the role of INEC, like he said. He said his electoral officers are not trying to fight criminals, they are trying to carry out an election. So clearly there is a gap as regards
some electoral officers were found, actually. I just had to intervene there because it reminded me of one of them who was found with result sheets already filled. Yeah, and you wonder how such a thing could actually
So that's why I say
happen.
there are two factors that puts a lot of challenge in our elections, why we'll still keep having the kind of elections we have. One is the role of security agencies. Then two is what I would call consequence management. So an INEC staff goes ahead, for instance, like I said before, to a returning officer goes ahead to return, even when it's clearly against the margin of lead, after all the resources has been put in, and even citizens' time committed to come participate in an election, and you go ahead and make a return against the rule of margin of lead. And so who takes responsibility? We need to see such people being prosecuted or put to jail. So an electoral officer, like he mentioned, in Jos South or in Enugu South, results of elections, polling unit results were not available at the point of opening of polls. What happens to the EO? Is it so? He said they've suspended the guy in Jos. That is good enough, but I don't know if it is the place of INEC or security agencies to take it beyond that, to prosecute such persons, and if found guilty, jailed. In Kogi State, you will remember that in that Kogi election, we had issues of pre-fill. That INEC at the time made a statement and they suspended the collation at that time, but after some hours they made another statement and they concluded the collation. But the fact still remains that results were stolen at the point of the rack centers where materials are distributed to SPOs distribute materials to presiding officers. Now, it was a fact that that happened. We reported it from our situation room. But what happens to the person in charge, whether he's the EO or he's the coordinating supervisor, whoever that is in charge? So that's about consequence management. Now, INEC signs a contract with this service delivery, National Union of Road Transport Workers, that on election day, these guys need to be available. And they've taken their data, they've signed a contract. On election day, a particular driver doesn't turn up, or rather, so he turns up, he gives him materials, he takes the materials and disappears, or he takes it to the house of, delivers it to the politician. Consequence management. What happens to that driver? So if we keep acting this way, we'll keep having the kind of elections we'll have, because everybody will come back the same day and same thing happens. A lot of people get involved in ballot busting. You're talking about why would they be ballot bust snatching? If security agencies don't rise up to the occasion, ballot bust snatching will never stop with the electoral laws that we have. It won't stop, because for a lot of politicians is a do or die affair, because the compensation or the gain is one of the fastest ways to get rich in Nigeria. So you do not expect that it will be a civil affair by politicians.
Yeah,
so
but INEC has said that if that happens, if there's disruption, it can actually cancel that polling unit.
So Ikono-Ini is a case in hand. It happened on the election day, supplementary election, same thing happened. They've gone back to do the election date, it still couldn't get concluded. So you see, that's the part why I say why we acknowledge security agencies.
The elders of that community actually need to sit down with INEC.
I think it's about the security agencies. And I say this. So talking about consequence management as well, on the part of the security agencies, I'm sure they put people in charge of maybe wards or polling units or something. You know, there has to be a coordinator of some sort. When the deployment that is expected to be there is not there, and talks invade and disrupt the process, what happens to that officer who is in charge of that? So consequence management. All of this is to come into play for us to start having better elections. But that's not to say that we're not making progress. If you remember elections in 2007, 2011, I remember 2007 election, people were still out there in the field. On the election day, I remember Anambra, I think Anambra was one of those cases. By 3-4 p.m., they were announcing results.
Yeah, I mean, that was during the infamous period of Morris.
So we're making progress.
Yeah,
we can get better.
So as we try to round off this conversation, talk to us about how Nigerians are receiving the results that have been trickling in from the different states. It looks like all the political parties won in one way or the other. I mean, these are constituency elections in different communities and all of that. Talk to us about the mood of citizens, I mean, and of course how CSOs like you have been monitoring it.
Well, for the politicians who are also stakeholders, are also voters, I won't be surprised if they still go back to court after going to court to get a rerun. Then I go back to court again to also seek another rerun. But for the result, like you said, close to about 8 or 9 political parties won across the regions, more like trying to reflect that the popular candidates won. But that doesn't take away the part of vote buying, as we observed in the election. And some places, I think in Plateau or so, we saw vote buying going as high as 40,000 naira
per voter.
Yeah, per voter in this election. So all of that played a role, and then not to also forget that there was voter apathy. If you put it all together, I mean, there were a few places where we had high voter turnout, but put it.
I mean, there was one particular area, I think in Plateau North, where, for example, the PDP, because it wasn't participating, they all asked their supporters to actually vote for the ADP, which they had adopted, and of course, the ADP just won, and it was surprising.
But it's politics. For whatever negotiation they did to arrive at that, I mean, it happens. It's not illegal in any way.
Okay, so in a nutshell, what would you say INEC would have learned from this entire exercise?
Well, for me, I think INEC seeing the challenges, because I think it should be disturbing if I'm the INEC chairman and we put all the efforts in place, and just because of lack of security or because of the role of other stakeholders, the whole effort is put into a mess, or we'll lose some of our staff, like the cases where they were taken hostage. Thankfully, they were released. Yeah. Or you put the coppers, like we see, in at risk. You know, that shouldn't happen. I think INEC needs to do a deeper, more level of collaboration with security agencies, proper mapping, so that the right number of deployment to places where they have history of violence will be done. Heavy deployment should be done in those places, so that INEC can go ahead and do their business. So I will hope that we'll then have credible elections. All
right, we must thank you so much. Emmanuel Njoku is the Director of Elections at Connected Development, a civil society organization. We must thank you so much for joining us.